Good morning, happy Friday, or I guess it could be afternoon. Happy Friday regardless. We have officially almost made it through the second full week of e-learning, and so far so good from my end. Hopefully you guys are feeling like it's going well for you too. Make sure you hop on my office hours today if you have any questions before you take the quiz. But I have a couple things that I want to just quick go through with you guys that happened in the second part of Act 2 that you read for your homework last night. So, or second part of Act 2, second part of Act 1. Okay, it's early. I need more coffee apparently. So the first thing, and I mentioned this in my video yesterday, is this prose section that happens here. We get a view of the nurses, so the nurse family, Rebecca and Frances. And I just want to point out that they are really well respected in the town. Okay, so we have this section that says, Rebecca was the wife of Francis Nurse, who, from all accounts, was one of those men for whom both sides of the argument had to have respect. So Francis Nurse says that, if two people are arguing, they still need to be respectful of each other, even though they disagree. He was called upon to arbitrate disputes as though he were an unofficial judge. So lots of people wanted him to come and listen to the arguments to kind of offer his opinion because he was so well respected, and he kind of commanded respect of other people as well. And Rebecca also enjoyed the high opinion most people had for him. So a lot of people held her in really high esteem as well, right? She's really well respected in the town. And then this next section just kind of goes on to explain like the land that they own and this squabble that they kind of got into with Putnam, because everybody gets into a squabble with Putnam. But as for Rebecca herself, the general opinion of her character was so high that to explain how anyone dared cry her out a witch, and more, how adults could bring themselves to lay hands on her, we must look to the fields and boundaries of that time. So it does kind of give us a little spoiler that Rebecca is going to be called out as a witch. But again, it's saying here that she's so held in such high opinion by everybody else in the town that this is weird that she gets called out a witch, right? Okay, a couple other things that I want to kind of point out to you guys. So Proctor and Paris have this kind of like back and forth tete-a-tete, right? Where Proctor is really nitpicking at Paris and kind of his strategies and stuff, and he doesn't speak very kindly of him. So Proctor has not been going to church, and the people that are in the room, like Putnam, kind of call him out on that. And he says this, I have trouble enough without I come 5 miles to hear him preach only hell, fire, and bloody damnation. So he's like, I'm not trying to come 5 miles to hear about hell and damnation. And then he continues to say, here, there are many others who stay away from church these days because you hardly ever mention God anymore. And Rebecca even backs him up by saying this. It's somewhat true. There are many that quail to bring their children that don't want to bring their children, because all he's talking about is hell and damnation, and he doesn't really talk about God and the love that God has for him. So we kind of get insight into Paris's preaching, and Paris is not a guy who likes to be called out on his flaws. So instead of addressing that issue and saying, okay, I understand, I'll try to speak more about God, he instead starts complaining about his living situation and his salary. And he says, where is my wood? My contract provides I be supplied with all my firewood. I regard that 6 pounds as part of my salary. They're all like, no, you get 6 pounds a year to buy your wood. And he says, I am not used to this poverty, right? And he goes on like, I'm a graduate of Harvard, right? And all of these things, like complaining about the situation of his living and his salary and all of this stuff, instead of addressing the real issue with his preaching, which is that people aren't connecting with it, right? So instead of trying to like fix himself, he blames everybody else for what he is doing. So it's not like a great situation. And then Proctor just openly starts bashing him, right? He starts by saying, you're the first minister ever that did demand the deed to the house. So like, you're the first one that ever actually wanted to own the house that we provided you, which is ridiculous. And then he just continues, somebody is like, Paris says, there's a party in this church, there is a faction and a party, like saying that there's a group of people that's trying to drive him out. And Proctor says, well, then I must find it and join it. And Rebecca's like, you don't mean that. And Proctor says, I mean it solemnly. I like not the smell of this authority. So Proctor is openly like disgusted with Paris, and he's not afraid to hide it. So tensions are running really, really high in this room right now. And then they start, kind of, they have this little tiff with Giles and Proctor, and Proctor's going to chop down wood that Putnam claims is on his land, and Giles says, oh, it's not on your land. Your dad or whatever willed away land that wasn't his. So like in his will said, this land is mine when it actually wasn't. So again, we kind of get a look into the Putnam side of the family, which is a little bit conniving and scary. But then here we've got the section on Mr. Hale. Hopefully you skip that. Just know that he's a really intelligent man. So Mr. Hale comes, and then he starts the conversation, refocuses on the issue at hand, which is there witchcraft happening here? So I wanted you guys, as you were reading this, and I mentioned this in my video yesterday, I wanted you to pay attention to why Tituba ultimately confesses, right? Do we believe that she did it? We have an eyewitness that says that she was like doing weird stuff in the woods, right? So I think that it's safe to say that there was some sort of like conjuring or witchcraft that they were attempting to do. But if you don't believe in witches, then, all of this seems a little bit shady. Now look at this section here. Paris says, so they're constantly like questioning Tituba, and they're like, you have to tell us, you have to let the devil out of your life, come back to God, whatever. If you confess, we'll save you. Paris finally says, and remember, Tituba is his servant. So he says, you will confess yourself, or I will take you out and whip you to your death, Tituba. He is literally threatening to kill her if she doesn't confess and tell them who else is a witch. So like here Tituba is put in a really hard situation. Either she confesses that she was doing witchcraft and then has to give the names of other people that are witches that she saw dancing with the devil, or she's going to get whipped to death. Like, duh, she's going to give you a name, dude. She doesn't want to die. Okay, so I just kind of want you to pay attention, because moments like this are going to be extremely common throughout this play, where people are either being threatened for their life they're being threatened for their life if they don't confess. It's like, either you tell us who else was involved in this witchcraft, you give us a name. We don't care what name, you give us a name of somebody, or you're going to die, or you're going to go to jail, or you're going to be put on trial, or whatever. So remember, all the girls are in the room with them at this time hearing this. So like Abigail's in the room, Betty's in the room, and we don't fully know if Betty is just like actually unconscious or like bewitched, or if she's just faking it because she's afraid of the punishment that she's going to get. Okay, she's a kid, remember. Kids do silly things when they think they're going to be punished, and she could easily be faking her like comatose state. So here Paris threatens Tituba with death. The girls hear this. Tituba finally says, oh, no, don't hang Tituba. I tell him I don't desire to work for him. And then she starts spinning this tale, right? How the devil came to her at night, asked her to kill Paris, and then she finally confesses a name, right? And the name that she gives is Goody, I want to say Goody Good. Yep. The name she gives is Goody Good, okay? And Goody Good is a homeless kind of crazy woman that lives in the town. Okay, so by giving this name, she's not 100% like destroying someone's life, but I mean, the woman's still kind of crazy and homeless, so people would readily believe that she's a witch. Same with Goody Osborne. Okay, so she says Goody Osborne as well. Again, Abigail is sitting there hearing all of this, and she's like, oh, they're praising her for confessing these names, so maybe I should confess some names too, and then my uncle will get off my back and he'll start praising me instead of reprimanding me for dancing in the woods. So then Abigail has this whole section, right? She starts rising and she's like, I want to open myself up. I want the light of God. I want the sweet love of Jesus. And she is like playing it up hardcore, right? And then she's like, I saw Bridget Bishop with the devil. Okay, and I mentioned the movie to you guys. The movie is great. This scene is just so over the top and ridiculous. And they really do. It's like an uprising, right? And then Betty, all of a sudden, she rises from the bed and she's like, I saw George Jacobs with the devil. And it's just like absolute chaos in this room because they're just like shouting all these names back and forth and back and forth. But we have to take everything they say with a grain of salt because, again, all of this happened because Tituba was threatened with death. And when she confessed, she was showered with love and affection. Okay, so these girls are seeing that and they're like, oh, if we confess, we're going to be showered with love and affection too. And we're going to find out in the next act kind of what happens as a result of all of this. So that is Act 1. You guys have a quiz to take today. So make sure that you have finished that study guide, okay? It is due by 9 a.m. this morning, so hopefully you got that done. If not, make sure you finish it ASAP, get that turned in, and then you guys need to take the Act 1 quiz that is posted on Google Classroom for you. Once you're done with that Act 1 quiz, you are done with your work for today. We are going to start Act 2 on Monday. So have a good day. Again, if you have any questions, make sure you hop on my office hours before you take the quiz, and have a great weekend. Don't forget to get outside, get some sunshine, do something that lights your soul on fire, and reach out to your friends. Be a great weekend for a game night. Talk to you guys later.